Ninth and final race in the Wiesmann FIBT two-man bobsleigh World Cup. We're at Sochi, Russia, at the Sochi Sliding Center that will be the host venue for the 2014 Winter Olympic Games sliding sports. Hello everybody, I'm Martin Haven, alongside me Olympic brakeman Kurt Tomasevich, and we have had a fantastic first heat. The battle lines have been drawn up, and as we go for the final win of the season, it is Switzerland's Bert Hefti who is in the driving seat. Well, we've got a very close battle on our hands, and the trackers once more showed that there is no such thing as ultimate safety in a racetrack. Michel Klingler of Liechtenstein getting it wrong on the exit of corner 9, rolling into 10, 11, 12 and 13 before he and Brakeman emerged unscathed. We've got a tie for the silver medal position at the moment. Thomas Florschutz of Germany with a 13th fastest start, but a superlatively controlled drive, putting himself into distinct medal contention. The first of our two heats sees him tied with one of the fastest starters in the business. They hold the new start record here at 4.81 seconds. Oskars Melbardis and Daumas Dreskens of Latvia. And these two sleds, the Germans and the Latvians, lie just 1600ths of a second off the lead of the race. They are in front of Lyndon Rush, our World Cup points leader, who just needs to finish in the top 10 to claim the season-long crown and the crystal globe that goes with it. But Melbardis and Florschutz will, like everybody else, be chasing one man. Two-time winner already this season in just 5 starts. Bert Hefti of Switzerland putting in a great drive. Only the 3rd fastest start, and one of the smoothest looking performances on this Sochi track that we've seen all week. And Hefti has the lead. 1600ths may not be much here, as everybody is still learning fast about this track. Faster today than it has been at any stage in 2 weeks of training. Well, there are the results after the first of our two heats. Hefti leading by 1600ths from the tie, Florschutz and Melbardis, and Lyndon Rush looking a lock for the season-long Crystal Globe crown. Out of 33 sleds that started the first heat, the fastest 20, rounded out by Latvia's Oskars Kibasmanis, will go through. The remaining 13 will be interested spectators. Kurt Tomasevich, tell us about this Olympic track. This is everybody's focus for the next 12 months, right?
Yeah, everybody's learning, and we're all learning, trying to do it as quickly as possible because we don't have a whole lot of time on this track. Nothing really special about this track other than just a few uphill sections. The start, again, is very much like a Park City track or a Cesana track where, you know, the start times are going to be in the mid 480s, 490s, or a pretty decent 5 seconds. You really need to improve your start time. Curve 1 and Curve 2, very smooth, very easy, 2 right-hand curves. Curve 3, kind of a big left-hand curve, and that leads into Curve 4, a little tricky curve that some drivers seem to have a little bit of a problem with. Right here, Curve 5 into 6, you're actually going pretty steeply uphill. Curve 6, a double pressure curve. 7, a lot of drivers trying to get as much height as possible there. 8 is a little bit of a kink. Curve 9 has been obviously the most troublesome part because there's one crash and a couple drivers that ended up being on 2 runners there. Curve 10, triple wave curve. 11 into 14 through the chicane. 15 into 16, a major uphill section. And then the course ends with 3 right-hand curves in a row. Curve 15, 16, and 17. Track's about 1,500 meters long. Braking stretch is nice and long and uphill, so the brakemen don't have to stress too much about pulling the brakes right away.
Big starts required on this track, but cool hands as well. 20 sleds go in the final heat of the season. Oskars Kibasmanis of Latvia, 20th place in Heat 1, will start us off, and we'll wait for Bert Hefti, the last sled of the year, to go down to see whether he can claim win number 3 of his World Cup season. Rain outside this huge starting cathedral here at the Sochi Sliding Center, Sochi in Russia, but inside it is bone dry and the track covered all the way down. Means that conditions should be consistent for the athletes. The clock is running for the first of our starting teams, and that is Oskars Kibasmanis and Ravis Zirubs of Latvia. Kibismanis, the young Latvian driver, in only his second season driving, started in the fall of 2011.
A 4:91 start time in the first heat, matches that with a 4:91 start time in the second heat. You know, you said the conditions are the same, but you know, last night that didn't seem to be the case for the women's race. Every sled that came down the track, well, except I think with the exception of Jennifer Cicchetti, went at least about 0.6 of a second slower than they did in the first heat. And we'll see where Kibismanis' downtime ends up here. In the first heat, he had a downtime of 57.71. A couple of skids here that are costing him a little bit of the time, so you know, maybe it's not a fair comparison just after one sled.
He's still just 19 years old, this kid, so he really is the future, growing fast in Latvian bobsledding. Like the #1 driver, an ex-brakeman turned driver.
Here he comes into the final curve, a big left-hand curve, a lot of pressure on that brakeman.
And didn't quite have the speed of the first run in the speed traps, 57.81, a 1/10 of a second slower. And you're right, with all the sleds that have gone down, 33 in the first heat, there's been no time between the heats to re-prepare the track, so it will just degrade further, covered or not. My point was that if it was raining, this would now be whitewater rafting.
Kibismanis, a great start time. You know, he's been known to surprise a lot of people every week with a great start time of 4:91 in both heats, a rank of 7 in the first heat. Gets into the sled very nice and smooth. Brakeman as well, doesn't drift coming out. Well, maybe just a little bit of a drift left, but very minute.
Well, 19 years old, he's only going to get stronger and faster, and his driving will only get better. He's our race leader. Next up, Nikolai Estrate broke his wrist in a motorcycle accident at the beginning of the season. This is his first appearance driving a sled. He has not raced all year long, and yet the last starter in the field made it in. From 33rd to 19th spot now. Can he pick up a place or two? He's only 100th behind the French. He's only 1100ths behind the Dutch in 17th. He could move up a couple.
5:03 start time for him in the first heat. Same matches that as well. 5:03 again, but you know, that's just a few hundredths behind Kibismanis in front of him. So he's going to have to drive in order to keep his position and maybe move up a couple spots as well.
He's already got the same momentum, 74.4 as Kibismanis, off a slower start. So that gap could well come down. He keeps the sled nice and straight from 5 into 6. And then big pressure here, high line in 7, keeps it in the middle of the road, and he's already got the lead.
Yeah, I think that number is going to grow from 400ths of a second, maybe into double digits by the time he crosses the finish line.
2 kilometers an hour quicker than the Latvian. Yeah, nice looking drive, broken wrist or not, and a year on the sidelines. Estrate has not forgotten how to drive this sled.
Yeah, this is really hard to pick apart his run. It looks like very smooth between the curves, very straight in the straightaways.
Yeah, that was a good run, 57.60. That was quicker than his first heat. No wonder the coaches are looking happy. Well, good. I mean, literally, he is not driven all year long, but this is his old sled. It is at least familiar. It's like a comfortable pair of slippers. He knows what it does.
Yeah, it's not the fastest set of runners or the fastest sled on the hill, but, you know, he knows how to drive it. He's comfortable in there, and looks like he's picking the right lines to take the sled. Here, through curve 10, takes that double wave. Yeah, very smooth and straight into curve 11.
Well, if you're going to learn a new track, you don't want to be learning a new sled. You want to know the sled intimately, and that's why he's chosen that one. Next up, Loic Kosterg of France. Roman Heinrich, his brakeman. Final slide of the season for this rookie French team. What a debut season they have had. Been very impressed with their work ethic and their performance. But they were only 100th in front of Estrate. Can he hang on? It'll be a good job if he does it.
Now, one thing you might have noticed if you were watching really closely right there, when that brakeman jumped in the sled, he loaded one shoulder in at a time. And as soon as that sled came out of the start grooves, it kind of drifted left and then right. You want to be able to be very symmetric when you get in the sled, to keep that sled going straight.
Well, Roma is nearly as wide as he is tall, which is why he's trying to, a little bit like Alexei Vojevoda, trying to get one shoulder in at a time because he's just too wide for the sled. 900s behind. This is going to be very close. This is not a bad-looking run either. 124.6 is a little too slow. I think Estrate may have this in the bag.
Yeah, Kibismanis may catch him as well.
Well, he is in third place at the moment. That's a valid point. There was so little between these last three sleds in the field. Less than a tenth of a second, 1600s back. He's up to second place now. 1:28.6, not enough to catch Istrate, but enough to stay in front of Keepers Manis. 57.81, same time as Keepers Manis on this run, so he survives on his first round advantage. Well, no disgrace, Nikolai Istrate's got a decade more experience of driving bobsleighs than young Loic Kosteg.
Yeah, just small mistakes like right here at the edge of curve 9. Really long on that exit where he wants to be nice and smooth, and it kind of sends the sled in a little bit of a diagonal movement into curve 10.
The French Bobsleigh Federation very willful. Since they had big successes in the late 90s, they've not really had much to get them excited about the sport. Now I think they might. 17th after the first of our two heats here in Sochi was Edwin van Kalk of the Netherlands, with Bregman Sibren Jansma, their teammate. Ivo de Bruyn bumped out by the final sled in the first heat to 21st place, doesn't get a second run. And with the hamstring injury that's been plaguing him most of the season, Edwin still not pushing at full strength on the front of this sled. Nevertheless, Kurt Tomasevich, they were 9th fastest at the start. It was not the start that let them down, it was the drive.
Yeah, their splits were from 9 to 11 to 15, and they've crossed the line in 17th position, so Edwin definitely made a few mistakes while driving down the track. We'll see if he can correct them here. Very smooth so far into curve 3, good speed, 74.5 kilometers an hour. Over 0.2 of a second ahead so far.
This is looking a little tidier. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell. If you watch the runner tip to the very front of the sled, you can see if they're twitching, if the driver's having to make steering corrections off the corners. But in the turns, sometimes the steering is hidden. If you're working too hard, it can cost you. Now, that's much quicker than his first run. 2 kilometers an hour quicker than he was at this stage. This is a much better trip.
But a little bit slower than Nikolai Istrate. He's starting to lose his lead a little bit. It was 2100ths of a second. Now it's down to 1300ths of a second.
1:28.3, that's a kilometre an hour and change slower than Istrate's old sled, and that has got to worry the guys at Eurotech. Still not convinced of their speed in a straight line. Now, when they get up into those high numbers, I'm not quite sure that they're going as quickly as maybe they would like to be.
Yeah, a lot of it just has to do with the comfort level of the driver too. If he's comfortable in that type of sled, coming out of curve 11 into the chicanes, those little bends, it's hard to keep that sled from tapping a wall. And right there, Edwin took that tap on the left side, sent him maybe a little early into curve 14.
And he can count, folks. 11 does lead into 14, 12 and 13, those are the straight. I do have to keep explaining this. We don't just hire cheap, we hire intelligent. Now then, a tie for a 15th spot. We've got John Jackson and Bruce Tasker of Great Britain. They tied with Justin Cripps and Neville Wright. And this is a first-time combination. Bruce behind Jacko for a while this season, because he's had Craig Pickering in since Christmas time. Hildebrand built sled, the Royal Marine Commando.
Matches their start time of a 4:94 from the first heat. And that's what they need to do, because Cripps is going to have a stellar start time. He had a 4:84 in the first heat. So in order to break this tie for 15th place, Jackson needed to be competitive at the start and needs to be consistent driving down the track.
Well, there's two things that are happening at the moment. First, Justin Cripps is not watching this, and a big skid into 6 from Jacko. And secondly, Neville Wright is thinking, start record. Meanwhile, Jackson trying to keep himself in front of Edwin van Kalk.
Yeah, that skid you just mentioned, it was in that uphill section of the track, so his lead went from 1300ths down to 8, now down to 300ths of a second. Another skid coming out of 11 through 12, 13, and into 14.
Going to drop behind. What speed's he got? Van Kalk 1:28.3. Jackson is not going to have the same speed, I don't think. 1:27.9 is not going to cut it. He will drop back. And 300ths of a second is the margin, and he'll be disappointed with that. Coach Lee Johnson. I think he may actually have driven that sled. I know, it's Lamin Dean's sled, I think, is an ex-Lee Johnson chassis. Well, Jacko will be disappointed. You never like to lose a spot, and especially on the last trip of the season.
Yeah, here you can tell coming out of the curve, stays a little bit long on the right side. Stays on the smooth part of the ice, but coming up in the curve 6. That was that little skid you mentioned in that uphill section. And then here coming out of 11 through 12, 13, the chicane part of the track, and into 14, kind of a big skid by the back end of the sled.
Edwin van Kalker, John Jackson, Nikolai Estrate, our top 3. Second fastest starter in the first heat of 2 here in Sochi, Justin Cripps and Neville Wright. Can the Canadians beat the start record? No, it's a 4:86, just a fraction slower than the 4:84 in the first heat. Kurt Thomas Savage, still epic starting from this Canada 3 sled.
Sometimes when you have such a great start time in the first heat and you know you've got nothing to lose going into that second heat, sometimes you can almost try a little bit too hard where all you're thinking is that start time. You know, and maybe that's what they did just a little bit. Weren't able to improve on their 4:84 start time.
Still good disciplined drive from Justin Cripps. That was one of the features of his first run. Lets it fly from 9 to 10, but not too much. 1:15, again, 10 kilometers an hour down. That is not credible. There is something very odd with that timing, I cannot believe that's true.
Yeah, you just have to ignore that, I guess, because there's no way that is physically possible. He is losing time. He's now into the 3rd place, 0.05 of a second back, but you know, if he was actually 10 kilometers an hour slower, he'd be way back at the end of the pack.
Second back, yeah, absolutely. 57.86. He loses a spot as well to Van Kalker. In fact, he drops 4 spots. 1200s back. So John Jackson effectively does not lose a place, even though he was leapfrogged by Edwin van Kalker.
But here up toward the early part of the track, coming out of curve 2, I think going into 3, drifts a little bit right. Excuse me, this is 5 into 6. And that's that uphill section where he had a little bit of trouble.
It's the exit of 7, is it? Big height there, and again, that puts him into the inside wall. Little mistakes all cost you. There's only a few hundreds in it. Next up, Nick Cunningham and Dallas Robinson of the USA. 14th after the first heat. 26-year-old Cunningham from Monterey, California originally. And as often as he can, lives during the season in Lake Placid, New York. Dallas steaming like a racehorse, like the thoroughbred he is behind him. See what these guys can produce. 5th fastest first start. And Robinson will be pleased with that.
Dallas taking that sled maybe a couple steps, a little deeper. 4:93 start time. 50 kilometers an hour start velocity.
Yeah, that's good velocity. Only one sled's gone quicker, and that was Justin Cripps and Neville Wright.
Now that lead is up to 0.17 of a second, but Nick's really got to do a little bit better job of driving this heat. In the last heat, he had a great start time and fell back pretty quickly, but a good height in 7.
And the next crucial juncture is the trains transfer from 9 to 10, then exit 10 to 11. Good speed, good line. 1:25.1 is not bad.
Decent from 11 into 14 through the chicane. That's not an easy thing to do, to keep the sled straight and off the walls. Still 0.05 of a second ahead, pulling away now just a little bit away from Van Kalker.
1:28.5, that's very good speed from the sled, the Latvian-built BTC. Khan applauds that, the coach, as the Dutch wave goodbye from the leader's box. 3rd fastest run of the heat only, but it's enough to keep his nose in front. He will not slip a place. And he definitely tidied up a couple of the first trip mistakes there.
Yeah, Nick's got to be pretty pleased with his last 2-man run of the week here on this track. Let's see, I think this is coming out of curve C.
This is later on in the run, isn't it? This is
good
15,
speed
16.
before the end. Yeah.
1:28.5, not bad speed. Nikolai Estrate's old sled still the quickest there through that speed trap. Nick on the left, Dallas on the right. Next up with the colours of Saxony, the 2-man world champion Francesco Friedrich, with Marco Hubenbecker behind him. He's surely going to be the tallest brakeman in the business. And the 2-man world champion, unlucky 13th in the first of the 2 trips down this Sochi ice sheet.
Yeah, it's a pretty big surprise seeing him only 100th of a second ahead of Nick Cunningham. Good for Nick, not so great for our current world champion.
Well, can he stay in front of Cunningham? 50.3 kilometers an hour, that is the velocity that you get from racehorse Hubenbecker, and 74.6 again quicker than anybody in the second speed gun.
Yeah, great start time and great velocity. His lead is now up to a 1/10 of a second.
6 out of 7, good exit. Little tap, gets it online into 8 though, and doesn't bring it down too early. Good speed, 126.6, that's the quickest we've seen. The FES sleds have been flying all year long. Really great aerodynamics on those sleds.
Yeah, he's going to be well over a 1/4 of a second ahead as he crosses the finish line here soon.
Long slide though. 128.1, not as quick as Cunningham's BTC sled at the bottom, but he does take the lead. 57.46 drive.
Yeah, he's looking to move up. You know, he's not happy with 13th position. It was a tie for 11th, just 0.05 of a second ahead of him. So Friedrich definitely like to break into that top 10.
Well, 1/10 of an improvement would have put him 9th in the first heat.
Here from curve 11 through that chicane, takes the tap on the left side, sends him early into 14, and really high at the entrance of 14. That's about where Christoph Longen's reaction is trying to help Friedrich along.
There is Francesco Friedrich, junior and senior 2-man world champion, junior 4-man world champion as well. Next up, Alexander Kasyanov with Max Belugin. No Alexei Voyevoda running here on any of the Russian sleds in the 2-man, which is a bit of a surprise since he is one of the spokespersons for this Sankey Sliding Center. Kasyanov in 11th place, tied with Simone Bertazzo of Italy.
Kasyanov could definitely use a little bit of help at the start. A 4.96 start time in the first heat. Matches that with a 4.96 in the second heat.
Well, you've got to think that Voyevoda would help get maybe a 10th out of that, but there's so much politics around Voyevoda and who he will and won't race with, same as Beat Hefty when he was a brakeman.
Yeah, that start just is hurting him quite a bit. He was only 100th ahead at the start, or excuse me, 100th behind at the start. Now he's fallen back to 900th behind.
Well, at the moment, he is in danger of dropping behind both Friedrich and Cunningham.
But must have had a great line through curves 3, 4, 5. Reeling it in out to 600. Well, now down to 800ths of a second. So this is kind of a seesaw battle between Friedrich and Kasyanov.
Kasyanov still not close enough to catch the Saxon driver. 1/10 of a second, the gap is opening up. If he does anything from here, it'll be an amazing result. 128.9 though to 128.1, not close enough. 57.59 slide, not fast. That's getting on for 0.3 of a second slower than his first trip down. Again, one of the things that we talked about earlier is that you have got to have speed, but you've got to have consistency above all else.
Yep, you can see just wasn't consistent at the beginning part of curve 7 there, I think, as he starts to come downhill now.
And the ice you saw flying was not from the roof, as it often is, or from a hit. It's just ice falling out of the track with the progress of the runners through the corners. Simone Bertazzo and Simone Fontana of Italy tied for 11th spot, just 300ths out of a top 10 finish. After the first of our 2 heats here, Bertazzo lying 7th in the World Cup rankings. He's had a hatful of top 10 finishes already this season. Starting to find some of his old form, perhaps again in the 2-man.
I think the brakeman maybe could have taken it a cycle deeper. He was down and inside the sled before Bertazzo even hit his seat. 49.8 kilometers an hour, not great start velocity.
You never want to be the last one into the sled as a driver. You'd rather hope that the engine is still running behind you. Good speeds, though, compared to Kasyanov and Belugin.
Little tap there going uphill into curve 6.
Top speed so far, the next trap from Francesco Friedrich, 126.6. Again, this is another neat and tidy looking run, but the Italian sled, as in the first heat, not finding the speed there.
That's going to be really hard for him to reel in a top 10 finish now.
130.2 he had down at the bottom, one of the fastest 5 sleds. Can he do it again? No, he can't, and he's dropping further away. And Francesco Friedrich, as you predicted, looking to take scalps. He's taking names and kicking butt, as the expression probably doesn't go in Saxony. Friedrich continues to sit on top of the pile as Bertazzo slumps to 3rd spot.
Yeah, Kazanov also moving up a spot. Yeah, Bertasso just not the cleanest run he would have liked. Takes the tap and a little bit of a skid.
Well, funny enough, yesterday it was the sleds that were 11th and 12th. Jennifer Cacchetti in 11th and one of the Russians in 12th that rose all the way through the second heat. Is the same going to happen again with Friedrich and Kazyanov, who were 11th and 12th?
Here we have Germany, Russia,
11th and 13th, in fact. Final 10 sleds of our FIBT Wiesmann two-man bobsleigh World Cup season. And Stephen Holcomb of the USA with Steve Langton behind him. 10th after the first of 2 heats. And now a chance perhaps to move up. The sled in front of them in 9th is just 200s away. A further 600s away. That is 8th position. There are a lot of closely grouped sleds. Tidy up 1 or 2 little driving errors. Holcomb could be on the fringes of a top 6 finish.
Steve push a 491 in the first heat. 489 in the second heat. A great start time. 50.2 kilometers an hour, great start velocity. So you know he's looking to move up. He's got Mahada in his sights, because if he can catch Mahada and beat him by a couple of spots, then he can maybe earn that 3rd spot in the World Cup standings. He made a little bit of a mistake in the first heat between curve 5 and 6, but he's looking to clean that up as well.
Again, just a little late off 5, but not too much damage done. The next acid test is the exit of 7 into 8 and then corner 9. 8 the straightaway. He gets off 9, okay, into 10. The flip-flop, 125.2. Not bad speed, but Friedrich had 126.6. He's gone behind the current race leader. Now he needs something very fast at the bottom.
Pretty good lines at the bottom part of this track, but he's 0.12 of a second behind right now.
Half a kilometre an hour up is not enough. 57.69, the speed coming too late to help Stephen Holcomb, and he drops back 3 spots as well, or into 3rd place. Friedrich and Kazyanov are tied together, just 0.08 of a second apart, and they are together rising up the order, just as happened yesterday night in the women's bobsleigh race.
Holcomb maybe a little bit frustrated coming out of curve 11 through 12 and 13, the chicane part of the track, just a little bit of a skid, the back end of the sled, but you know, hopefully in 4-man tomorrow we can keep that sled straight and have a nice line into 14.
Stephen Holcomb offers his congratulations to Francesco Friedrich and Marco Hubenbecker, our race leaders. Next up, Rico Peter and Seaman Friedli. The target is Switzerland. And let's see if Friedrich and Kazyanov can both vault over the second of our Swiss sleds. A good full season in the World Cup for Rico Peter. The first time he's had a full season in at least 3 years. And now the rest of the Swiss team starting to get back to fitness, meaning there'll be a battle to try and get those World Cup spots for next year.
In the first heat they had a 496. 497 here in the second heat, but they had pretty rough start velocity in that first heat. They went from 15th place to 19th place, and Rico had to drive his way back up into 11th place. So we'll see how that start velocity in the top half of the track treats Rico now. 0.09 of a second back. Again, wasn't able to keep that lead from 0.03 of a second, and he's fallen back to 0.09 of a second.
Well, that means that he is likely to go further downhill. He's not as quick, in fact, as he was in the first heat already at this stage.
He's kind of stopped that bleeding. He's now only 0.08 of a second back and trying to reel in 0.05 of a second now, slowly getting better.
Again, we'll ignore the speed because that can't be right. He is getting closer now to Francesco Friedrich, the world champion, and he's back in front of him. 130.4 kilometers an hour, and again, good speed from the City sled, but that's a full kilometer an hour slower than he was last time down. 57.45, 0.2 of a second slower in the run.
Yeah, the Swiss are definitely doing something right with their equipment. Both Hefty and Rico Peter, you know, even though Rico didn't have a great start time, he was able to drill in a number of sleds just with good driving and good equipment.
Well, these uniquely shaped sleds were designed for the high speeds of Samoritz and Whistler.
Here's maybe his one big mistake is taking that tap on the right side of the wall.
That's where the luge start comes in between 2 and 3. Yeah, you saw Gregor Baumann with the black beard. He's been training here as well. Next up, Chris Spring and Lascelles Brown, Canada 2. And at the end of a pretty impressive recovery season for Chris Spring. Great result for Canada in the two-man World Championship, finished in 6th position. Let's see if they can get another big start. They do, a 4.89. It ties their first heat, and that was the 4th quickest in the field.
Yeah, again, we talked about how Lascelles can really power any sled that he's in. You know, a couple years ago, he was pushing Patrice Servelle to great downtimes. Now he's pushing Chris Spring in two-man sometimes, and every sled he's in, they seem to have success.
Before that, Pierre Luders, and I'm sure Pierre would love to be able to entice him to come and be a Russian for a bit.
I'm not sure that's going to happen.
Well, he slid for Jamaica, he slid for Canada, he slid for Monaco. Now he's back as a Canadian. He was only on loan to Monaco. They made that very clear.
We talked about Lascelles, but Chris Spring really doing a great job here. He's recovered from that major injury that he had last year in a crash in Altenburg, but driving really well.
Really good speed as well. 126.4 and 129 at the bottom. Well, maybe his Eurotech sled is finding really good speed. That was another good trip from Chris Spring. 57.37 to put him into the lead. With a tie for 7 between him and Manny Mahata, so 7 sleds still to come. But you're right, I mean, Altenburg was a big blow in his progress. This year, he's really come back fighting.
You can see him taking those waves through curve 10, that big right-hand curve. Does it very smoothly, comes out and into 11.
Chris on the right and Lascelles on the left. They're making a pretty handy combination, enough to frighten a lot of other starting crews. What about these guys? Manuel Mahata with Christian Poser behind him. Now, there's clearly a reason that Poser is starting on the back hands of the sled for the first time. But 22nd fastest start, I'm not sure that's the reason. I'm not quite sure what else is going on.
You know, we're post-World Championships here, so some teams, you know, they start to rest some of their best brakemen in order to get ready for next season a little bit. But, you know, this is a big race as well. On the Olympic track, you don't get many opportunities on this track, so you want to improve your start time and learn as much as you can in a short amount of time. And a 4:99 start time, so he's moved up a little bit.
Decent lines in the first 3 corners. This is the 4 into 5. There's no question that Mahata's got driving skills. Bigger slide off 5 than Stephen Holcomb had. If you start with an underpowered engine at the start, then you're always going to be trying to play catch-up.
Yep, that little skid cost him. He went from 1,700 to the second, now back to 1,800 to the second behind.
126.1, again, good speed from the FES sleds. He'd have had more if he had more acceleration at the start, though.
He's going to have to get it together really quickly in order to catch Chris Spring.
He ain't catching the Springer. 2100s back, the gap is only growing, and in the final corner, 128.8 isn't as fast as Chris Spring, never mind as fast as the other FES sleds, so he breaks the tie, Chris Spring, by 2200s. But you know what, again, you know, no wonder Spring looks impressed with himself. When you outdrive Mahata, you know you've outdriven somebody who knows what they're doing.
As well as Francisco Friedrich.
Yep.
You know, he hit Chris Spring finishing ahead of 2 Germans is making a pretty big statement.
Yes, it is indeed.
See at the top of the track, hitting the sled as hard as he can, but you know, just not having a great start time. And well, Mahata didn't have fantastic starts all year, but for the most part was able to drive back from some of those deficits.
Well, Mahata 3rd in the World Cup rankings, 3rd place race result in the Altenburg, behind the tie between Friedrich and Florschutz. So nobody's mug in 2-man or 4-man. Well, next up, perhaps one of the big stories of the first heat, the progress of Corey Butner and the newly lightened, beardless, almost Johnny Quinn. Big start from them and a really good drive from Corey Butner could seal them in a top 6 finish.
Yeah, they need to improve their start time. A 5 flat in the first heat, 5 flat here in the second heat. It's going to be really tough in order for him to hold 6th place if he's ranked that far back.
Well, 10th of a second back on Chris Spring now. He was only 100th in front of that tie with Spring and Mahata from the first heat, so 3 sleds covered by 100th. It's a little bit of a skid coming out of 5 into 6, did tidy it up.
That's that uphill portion of the track that can really cost you. He's 18 hundredths of a second back, now 24 hundredths of a second back. This is going to be really tough for him to reel in Chris Spring now.
123.7, Spring 126.4. I'm now taking back what I said about the speed of the Eurotech sled, at least Chris Spring's. Very different noise as well as look from this Bodine sled. 129.7, very good speed at the bottom, but again, all too late. That last downhill corner's not enough to catch. 57.66, and he slips down 4 spots behind Rico Pater and Manny Mahata. But he's still in front of the two-man world champion.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that Johnny Quinn was notified a little late in this week that he was going to be racing this two-man. And I think if they could have had a little more time to prepare, I think that start time would have been a little bit better, because I know they both have the strength and speed and potential to push a great sled.
Again, Corey's going to look at problems like this. Just a little mistake and a jump into 6. Just didn't quite time that entry right. Chris Spring, Rico Pater, Manny Mahata, the top 3. 5 to come. The man that most expected to win this race here in Sochi was Alexander Zubkov of Russia. He is now 5th after the first heat, and a chance of a win here seems unlikely. Martin Haven and Kurt Tomasevich watching the action with you. And Kurt, 5th fastest start, not perhaps as quick as we might have expected, but that was probably the least of his problems.
Yeah, even with a top 5 start on this track, I would expect Zubkov to be able to drive into at least 1st, 2nd, or 3rd place at the worst. But in 5th place was not a spot that we expected him. He does improve his start time from a 490 to a 488.
Well, still Justin Cripps and Neville Wright, Canada 3 have outstarted Russia 1. So it's not all roses yet, but Zubkov's now got to find something on this track. Gets a better exit of 5 and definitely a better run into corner 6.
A little bit of a skid between 6 and 7, but pretty small. That lead's still growing to 16 hundredths of a second.
Good height in 7 as well, but beating Chris Spring is not what it's about for Alexander Zubkov, because that only leaves him still with 4 sleds to come as the leader.
Yep, Chris Spring actually going faster at this point in the track. Zubkov's lead is now only 11 hundredths of a second.
Spring had 129 kilometers an hour, 0.3. Same with Zubkov. He holds the lead by a 10th. 57.39. I think Spring will take that any day of the week. That's a great drive from Chris Spring, or a big underperformance from the Russians, and I'm not quite sure where those two meet in the middle.
Yeah, Zubkov pumping his fist because he's pretty excited that he's in 1st place right now, but I don't think that kind of a drive is going to be able to hold off the top 4.
Well, he was 2 hundredths behind Lyndon Rush in 4th place, but 29 hundredths off leader Bert Hefty. I don't think he's going to take a gold medal here unless there's something very, very bizarre in the next 4 sleds. But Zubkov there takes the lead. Lyndon Rush now on the brink of winning the World Cup title. He is the World Cup points leader, has been since La Plagne in France. And only Oscars Melbardis could take it away, but Rush, as we look at our race leaders, merely needs a top 10 finish. Of course, he's only 9 hundredths out of the medals, so that's what he and Jesse Lumsden are looking for. 492 first start. Can they get quicker into the 80s? No, 491. And the Canadians had a little bit of an up and down season. 7th in Lake Placid, 20th in Salt Lake, and then a run of medals. 3 hundredths of a second behind Zubkov. This is touch and go. Tiny skid from 5. Good entry into 6 and good exit.
Yeah, Lyndon and Jesse definitely hungry throughout this last week. They knew they pretty much had the overall World Cup 2-man titles sewn up, but at the same time, this track is very important. A lot of teams want to do well. I know Lyndon didn't want anybody to walk away thinking that they have a chance on catching him.
3 kilometers now down on Chris Spring, similar Eurotech sled, but he's 100th of a second to lead. 129.1. Zubkov 129.3. It's just enough to keep him there. A dead heat for the lead of the race. Graham Richardson liking that one. Wow, that is as close as it gets. So we've got a tie for the lead. We've got 2 sleds tied from the first heat coming up, and then Bert Hefty. The Russians might have to break out a second bag of medals. Oh no, they already gave the 2 main medals away to the skeleton athletes yesterday by mistake. Well, we have joint leaders. Wow, close enough. There is your new World Cup champion, boys and girls. And look at the speeds down at the bottom. 129.1 for Lyndon Rush, 129.3 for Zubkov, 129.3 for Spring, but 130 for the City sled of Rico Peter. Great men waving, drivers watching the screen. 3 sleds to go in the World Cup season 2012-13. Oskars Melbardis, Dalmas Driskins tied for second, 1600ths off the lead. The start record holders with a 481 first getaway. Can they find anything more as they go for gold? They cannot. 483, still quicker than anybody else has laid down on this track.
Now, the first heat, Melbardis had a great start time of 481, the start record that's going to hold until next year at least. But he wasn't able to hold that lead. He just had some big mistakes at the top part of the track. His lead's now 2200ths of a second, going from 5 into 6, fairly straight, but it's going to be hard for him to hold that 2200ths of a second if he makes any more mistakes. Slowly slipping away down to 2100ths of a second. 124.3 kilometers an hour.
He had 1200ths in hand over Zubkov, 11 over Lyndon Rush from the first heat, so he's only just keeping that alive. But again, testament to a driver only in his 3rd season at the front of the sled, but he is keeping that alive, and he's got very good speed as well, 129.2. He takes the lead by that 1/4 of a second, so he opened up his advantage. A 10th quicker than either Zubkov or Rush. That is a good job well done. Guarantees himself a medal here on the Olympic track.
Yeah, that time he was able to hold the great start velocity, keep that speed throughout the track, and actually extended his lead a little bit too after it started to fade. So great driving as well this time by Melbardis. A little bit high in curve 7, which is where you want that height. Excuse me, that's curve 11. And then from curve 11 into 14 through the little chicane, 12 and 13. Pretty good lines.
Good drive from Oskars Melbardis. There's Dalmas Dreskins, looks pretty happy with himself as well, he might. Tied after the first heat, the fastest starters and the 13th fastest starters. Thomas Florschutz and Andy Bredow with the latter. Now again, if they can find even a fraction, that might be enough to put them back in front of the Latvians. But they started 1400 slower in the first heat.
Yeah, that's definitely where they have to improve. Thomas Florschutz and Andreas Bredow, not the fastest starters here, but if they can improve that 495. Keep it the same, 495 again. It's going to be tough. Tomas is going to have to drive pretty flawlessly down the rest of this track.
At least they're not giving anything away. They stayed the same as Melbardis, dropped off a fraction at the start, 74.6 to 74.9 of Melbardis, 1900s back. But around corner 6 or 7, that deficit should stop growing, and then we should see the silky skills of Thomas Florschutz bring this green sled back. 1500ths, the lead is coming down.
Yeah, great call. It's gone from 19 now down to 1500ths of a second and 125.7 kilometers an hour. Only 10th back. This is going to be really close coming into curve 14. 3 curves left.
Not much ice left, just a couple 100 meters between Florschutz and the line. He's 200ths of a second in front of the leader from Melbardis. 135, great speed. He opens it up to a 10th.
Wow, you know, I mentioned that he would have to drive flawlessly in order to match Melbardis' time, but, you know, beating it by a 10th, he really outdid my expectations.
3 kilometers of ice, 2 very different teams, 1/10 of a second between them. That's remarkable.
That's going to put a lot of pressure on Beat Hefty and the Swiss team that are coming up next.
Well, bearing in mind, he won by a 10th. He gave away 2900ths over 2 runs at the start to Melbardis.
A good height in 7, coming through a little bit of a kink in the track we call curve 8 right there, and then into curve 9, just misses the right wall. Nice early entrance.
There's your race leader, Thomas Florschutz of Germany. Is he going to claim victory? That would be a big achievement. He won in Altenburg, sharing it with Francesco Friedrich. Beat Hefty's won twice in Winterberg and in Eagles. Winterberg, his annual victory there. 4th in a row, I believe. The first round leader, Beat Hefty, with Thomas Lamparter behind him.
They had a lead of 1600ths of a second going into this heat. Now, 485 in the first heat, 484, one of the few teams that were actually able to improve their start time. So that's saying that they really want this win.
Oh yeah, no question about it. He doesn't care about the pre-event winner, rarely wins the games. He's got the confidence to take it and run with it for another year. 3,500s up. He's doubled his advantage over Thomas Florschutz of Germany. And now all he needs to do is drive comfortably down the rest of the track. Good height in 7, gets the exit through 8 and into 9. He's good to go from 10. Great speed.
Good triple wave in curve 10 through 11. Takes a little bit of tap between 11 and 14, but it's not going to matter. He's got great speed, a huge lead right now. He's going to cross the line in first place.
Is he going to be in the 130s? Will he have top speed at the bottom of the track? He is fast again. He's going to win. Baird Hefty claims the final race of the season. His 3rd win, and Eric Allahar is thrilled. The Frenchman coaching the Swiss team sees their lead driver win again. Well, Hefty and Lamparter left nothing to chance there, did they? They upped the ante at the start, and Beat had the speed on board to make those errors and still drive away from the opposition.
Yep, the only question left is see if they can break that curse next year at this time. You know, the winner of this event has very rarely, I think John Morgan, our producer, mentioned that 1993 was the last time that the winner of the test event actually went on to win the Olympics.
Wow.
So that's it's going to be saying quite a bit if they can break that superstition.
Well, they have done enough here to claim a victory. They drove away from the field in both heats, didn't just hang on. He almost doubled his advantage. 1600ths in the first heat, he wins by 3/10, so that's another 1400ths of a second that he's added to his lead over Thomas Florschutz in 2nd place and Oskars Melbardis in 3rd. No medal for Alexander Zubkov here. 4th place, tied with Lyndon Rush, who claims the World Cup crown ahead of Melbardis and Mahata. 7th place, 6th place, Chris Spring of Canada. Well, this is the winning run, and from start to finish, it's the speed on board the sled and the speed that Hefty manages to keep Kurt Tomasevich that puts him into victory circle.
Yeah, Hefty's going to be a force to reckon with next year. Him and Tomas Lamparter, a great team. You know, they didn't have the 2-man finish that they wanted in St. Moritz at the World Championships just by not being on top of that podium, but here they made a statement saying that they're going to be here next year as well.
Yeah, do you know what? They will parlay a silver medal in the World Championships if they end up with a gold medal in the Olympic Games, that's for sure. Confirmation then of the final pools check. Baird Hefty, the winner from Thomas Florschutz and Oskars Melbardis, and Canada's Lyndon Rush in 4th and Chris Spring in 6th position. Great results for them. Disappointment perhaps for Stephen Holcomb, 12th place. Justin Cripps, great starting, finishing in 18th spot in our top 20 roundup. Sankey Sliding Center, Sochi, Russia, the 9th and final Wiesmann FIBT World Cup of the two-man bobsleigh season, and confirmation that Lyndon Rush has claimed the Crystal Globe for the first time in his career as the overall season champion, ahead of Oskars Melbardis and Manuel Mahata. And Bert Hefty on half a season just outside the top 10 positions, but with 3 wins to his credit. And it was Bert Hefty and Thomas Lamparter who set the benchmark in the first heat. A start record and a first-round lead, and they went last of all to defend that advantage to the hilt, almost doubling the lead to claim victory by 0.3 of a second on this pre-Olympic race. Well, let's get down to our finish dock and find out what the top 3 thought of it. Here's John Morgan.
Representing Latvia.
Here where the women are bringing out the flowers, and the president of the International Bobsled Federation, Ivo Ferriani, is giving away the awards here. And now we go into our interviews.
Representing Switzerland.
So now we go to Oscars. Good start times.
Jā, viss izdevās. Tu tiešām šodien lielisks starts un braucienu, un gribu pateikt milzīgi paldies sponsoriem, kas šo sezonu ir ļoti lielu atbalstu mums devuši, un otrkārt paldies Daumantam par šo sezonu, ļoti gara, un viņš izturēja ko to godam. Paldies visiem.
He talks about a lot about his brakeman and the good start times and the sponsorship they've had and all the support, and great season, good result, good season. Now we'll go over to Thomas Florschutz. Andre, you guys, good starts, good drive.
Ja, wir sind sehr zufrieden. Also ich denke, am Start haben wir noch ein bisschen Reserven, aber auf der Bahn waren wir, glaube ich, die Besten heute. Und wir sind richtig froh, dass wir hier die Saison so gut abschließen können.
Yeah, he says he can do better here. He's had good starts, good drive, but he knows he can do better at the start and the finish. Congratulations, great season. Now, Team Hefty, wow. Are you surprised?
Ja, es ist doch schön, auf der Olympiabahn so zu starten, dass wir gewinnen konnten. Das ist für uns genial. Ja, dass wir auch die Saison so abschließen können mit noch einem sehr guten Start und einer guten Fahrt.
Yeah, he's just impressed with how he can finish the season like this and on the Olympic track to do what he did. What a great result. Congratulations to Team Hefty.
Congratulations indeed to Bert Hefty, Thomas Lamparter, our final World Cup winners of the season, Thomas Florschutz and his late replacement brakeman Andy Bredow, taking over from Kevin Kuska during the World Championships 2 weeks ago. And that is it for the season for the two-man bobsleigh Wiesmann FIBT World Cup. I hope you've enjoyed it. My thanks to everybody who's been with us in the booth to bring you all their words of wisdom. From the crew here, from me, Martin Haven, it's goodbye for now.